back to another episode of Yarn to Table. My name is Celeste, and I want to thank you for joining me today to talk about knitting goodness. If this is your first time watching me, I really hope that you find something here that you appreciate, and I hope that you will join us by hitting the subscribe button and checking out the Yarn to Table Ravelry group. The link for the Ravelry group is in the doobly-doo, and you can also find it by just searching for Yarn to Table on Ravelry, and that is where you will find information about any giveaways or knit-alongs, and where we can chat more about all of this. And you can also find show notes with details about all of my projects and everything that I talk about in every episode. You can also find details of my projects on my project page on Ravelry. I am Celeste Full. I'm also Celeste Full on Instagram, and I post progress and other yarny goodness on there all the time, as well as some little snippets from my life. So I hope you will join me there as well. Let me start by announcing that we are going to start our very first KAL on this channel. So I mentioned last week what I was thinking about, and I got lots of good feedback from you guys, so thank you for that. I also want to thank you for watching and responding so positively to my first vlog. That's definitely something that I would like to do more of, either for special occasions like holidays and vacations, or other sort of more day in the life things like I showed you then, especially if there's something yarn related going on, as there was with my trip to Fabergé. Fabergé is the kind of those fancy eggs. That's why that word sounded right to me. I was like, why was I doing that? So the KAL is going to be a new sock technique KAL, and you can use the hashtag #NewSocksKAL on Instagram to keep us updated on your progress. I've also already set up a chatter thread in the Yarn to Table Ravelry group, and there will be an FO thread posted within the next week or so. So the thread, or the KAL, is officially open now, and so anything that you start now, anything that you cast on today qualifies, and it's going to run through April 30th, which gives people who are not as fast of knitters enough time to knit a pair of socks without feeling super rushed, and it gives those of you who are fast knitters the opportunity to try maybe a few different techniques. So the way that this is going to work is, if you do multiple pairs of socks with different new techniques for each sock, you can effectively enter to win a prize as many times as you have pairs of socks. And I don't know what the prizes are going to be exactly yet, but one of them will be a pattern that was generously donated by Yarn and Time Designs. That's time like the herb, THYME. And it is her pattern for her gardener mitts. So check those out on Ravelry, see if they look cute to you. That'll definitely be one of the prizes, but I would like to do at least one more, just so that I can have something that's a little bit more socks related, either a socks pattern or maybe some sock yarn, anything along those lines. And definitely let me know if you are a creator of any kind and you're interested in donating a prize for this KAL or future KALs or future giveaways. I don't know why it's so hard for me to say giveaway. I did that last week too. So let me know if you're interested in that, because I know a lot of you are probably very creative and crafty people out there who are making awesome things. So that's the new socks technique KAL. Oh, I know, I wanted to give you a rundown of some ideas for new socks techniques. This, if you'll notice, this is actually pretty exciting. I have a new teapot. Show you this. Oh, I was turning it around to show you, but I guess it's got it on both sides. There's some cute little gold metallic drips, and then on this side some others, and there's actually one running down the spout. So cute. This is by gosh, I'm gonna butcher her name, I forgot it. I keep wanting to say Kyoko, but it's Reiko Kaneko. Yeah, Reiko Kaneko. And the cup has a little Try to get the glare off of it. Glare. There you go. Like a little imprint like you've left your lipstick behind, but it's gold metallic. So that's called the Drip Tease pot, and this is the Lip Tease mug, and I actually found them on Amazon, I want to say from the MoMA store, Museum of Modern Art in New York. I've actually wanted these for 5 years. They were on my gift list, my wish list for our wedding, and I had been coveting them for several years before then. And I never bought them because they were overseas, like very expensive shipping, as you can imagine, for something fragile and heavy. And then when I saw that MoMA was carrying them in their shop on Amazon, I freaked out. So I bought one mug and one teapot. I obviously don't really need any more mugs or cups. That's not a thing that I need. But I really wanted to have a nice teapot that I was enthusiastic about, because the one that I have is just like an old chipped teapot that is a hand-me-down from my mother. And I'm drinking Bengal Spice from Celestial Seasonings, which is probably my favorite tea right now. It has a lot of cardamom in it, which I think really sets it apart from like any other kind of spice or chai type teas that you'll find on the market. It has like that very nice velvety sweetness of cardamom, which I love. Okay, so about the cowl. I made a little list here. So when I say a new sock technique, it can be more of a knitting technique, but it can also just be a smaller change to the way that you do socks. So here are some ideas, and I have all of these listed in the initial post on the chatter thread on Ravelry, so you can reference that if you're looking for ideas later and trying to decide what you want to do. So for example, it could be a new stitch count or a new needle size that you've never done before. Like say you're considering going down to 56 stitches, which is what I knit my socks as. That would count. It can be a new weight or a new fiber content for your yarn. So maybe your first pair of sport weight socks, maybe your first time doing alpaca or stellina or cashmere socks. It can be a new orientation of needles, magic loop for the first time, DPNs for the first time, 2 circulars for the first time, knitting socks 2 at a time would all count for that. It can be a new size, so your first baby socks, your first men's socks, your first kids socks, or even your first knee socks or your first shorty socks would count. It can be toe up for the first time if you've always done cuff down, or cuff down for the first time if you've always done toe up. It can be a new heel, a new toe shape, or a new cuff style even if you just want to try, you know, making your cuffs really long or doing a twisted rib when you've only done a regular rib before. Something like that would count for sure. It can be your first time working with a new print of yarn, so your first self-striping yarn, printed yarn, meaning where it gives that faux ferrule effect. It could be your first time working with variegated or speckled or gradient yarn if you've never worked with those before on a sock. Could be your first time to do any kind of color work on a sock, so manual striping, stranded, intarsia, and of course if you've done intarsia before, if you've never done it on a sock, that still counts. It could be your first cable sock, your first lace sock, or even your first patterned sock at all if you've only done vanilla socks. That would be a really fun new technique to try. And one that is really exciting for me is the idea of sock blanks. If you've never worked with a sock blank, which I never have, this could be your first sock blank. So those are just some ideas. Of course, this can also be your very first sock. If you've never knit a sock before, that totally counts as a new technique. So feel free to join us. I would love to have some first-time sock knitters because, as you know, I'm very, very passionate about sock knitting, and I know that I would be happy to offer advice and help you out, and I'm sure everybody else on the thread and in the community here would be as well. So please join us, and don't worry if you are, you know, thinking like, well, what if I can't finish it in time? Like, I find that with cowls, it's better not to worry so much if you're going to meet the requirements for the finished object thread. If you just want to try and participate in the chatter thread, that's sort of the most fun part of it, at least for me. So definitely do that. And you know, if you just started a new technique with socks, for example, a few days ago, and so it doesn't qualify for the finished object thread, still post that in the chatter thread, because I want to hear about your experiences doing a new technique with a sock. You get what I'm saying. So I think I'm probably going to do a sock blank for the first time for this, mostly because everything else I've really done, I mean, there's some fibers I haven't done for socks, so I might just do my first pair of cashmere socks. And obviously there are heels and toes that I haven't tried before, but I'm pretty into the ones that I'm using right now. So I've done some experimenting with that lately, so I'm not super pumped to do that. The only other thing I can really think of that I haven't done before is, well, I haven't done knitting on 2 circulars, but I'm not really interested in it. And I haven't done 2 at a time, but I'm not really interested in that. So I think that I'm going to do the sock blank. That's the one that really gets me excited. And of course it enables yarn purchasing because I don't own a sock blank, which is the one thing that's sort of making me hesitate about it and making me think, well, maybe I should just do the cashmere. So, because I have that in my stash. So we'll see how I feel, but let me know what you think. Go ahead and enable me to buy that sock blank, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, now that we have covered new business and old business, as you guys used to do parliamentary procedure in your clubs when you were a kid, let's move along to finished objects. I have one finished object for you. I'm super excited about this. It is my love socks. Eee! So I don't have these on my sock blockers because I really wanted to give you a good shot of the hearts themselves, which obviously don't look to their best effect from the profile. And I've talked a little bit about these socks already. So when I did my half object last week, I went into some detail about the construction. And if you haven't seen that, I will just show you briefly. This is a free pattern on Ravelry by Devin Clement. And here you have this inside of the heel flap. You can tell that the top of the sock is the top of the heart is stranded, whereas the rest of the heart is done in intarsia. And the reason for that, if you know about intarsia, you know that you have to have, like, for this section, you have to have 2 separate hanks of white and then a pink in the middle. So if you were doing the top part of the heart, you'd actually have to have 5 separate hanks instead of 3 separate hanks. So stranded really works better for that. And actually they're close enough that I didn't even have to catch my floats. It didn't recommend I catch my floats. They're really not any longer than an inch, which is one rule of thumb. Some people want to catch their floats more frequently than that, but I figure for such a short little area of stranded, it's not a big deal. So yeah, I really focused on these this week. As you saw, I only had just a bit of the cuff done on the second one, which, yeah, this is the second one. And they're my February socks, you know, along with the Imlertensias, and I really wanted to get them finished before I was too embarrassingly far into March. So I really gave them a lot of my time this week. And I actually did have a lot of fun. I realized that intarsia, although it's kind of a pain to set up and it's not the best for on the go, it's actually really, really fun. I actually totally enjoyed it, and I feel like I would like to do more intarsia projects now. So here's something interesting though. I think I was being more careful on my first heart, and in my second heart I wasn't paying as close attention, and you can tell up around the top it is a little bit puckery. So I'm hopeful that maybe when I kind of block them and stretch them out a little, that might clear up just a tad. But yeah. So those are my socks. I absolutely love them. I cannot wait to wear them. I haven't put them on my feet yet because I wanted to show them to you guys fresh. And you know how hard that is for me. So I hope that you are grateful. Just kidding, but seriously though. Yeah. So not a ton to say that I haven't already said about these, but I found them to be a really nice balance of process and product. I definitely remembered during the course of them that I don't love manual striping. It's just not super fun in that way that self-striping is. It does make the time go faster in that same way where you kind of want to get to the next stripe. But it's like, for me, it's an issue of catching yarn. So for these, I didn't catch it all because I was only doing 4 rounds per stripe. I didn't think that would be a big deal. It did end up leaving slight little holes, which I then covered up when I wove in my ends. So not a big deal. But just, you know, I don't know. It's like, it's just not as perfect as I would like them to look. And then to make them look more perfect would require like being more vigilant and like actually catching my floats. So I don't know. I have a pair of manually striping socks planned for later in the year, for October. They've got some stranded work with like little black cats on the top, and then they're going to be striped. They're called, I want to say, like the Superstition socks or something like that. Anyway, I'm thinking I'm going to try doing those with the stripes being 2 rounds each. And maybe that'll help. And then I might also consider actually doing the thing where you like slip the first stitch or whatever it is that you're supposed to do so that your stripes line up properly, instead of being like mine are where where is it? There it is. Where they're not lined up properly. Which I've talked about previously, why I kind of don't want to futz with it because I'm afraid I'll just forget and then it'll be inconsistent. So yeah, those are all questions, but the Intarsia itself, kind of a pain to set up, super fun to do. I think it's one of those things where you just gotta come at it for what it is. It's for when you're in the mood to do a little work, to, you know, estimate how much yarn you're gonna want and measure those off and wind those little center pull skeins that are gonna hang off. And once you do that, I mean, it's not really fiddly. They're not getting tangled up. I've got that great helpful video linked in my show notes in this episode again too, so definitely consult that if you're doing Intarsia for the first time. I found it really, really helpful in every way. It lets you know when to wrap, and because you don't actually wrap depending on what the slope is, if it's going to the left or the right or straight, up and down. And it lets you know how to wind those center pull hanks, and yeah, it's really, really, really good. Yeah, so I'm pretty jazzed about Intarsia right now, and there's another Intarsia project, a sweater that I'd like to knit sometime next winter probably, that's in my queue. So I'm actually, you know, I picked it out because I really like the way that it looked. It has these cardinals on it, and cardinals are kind of a symbol for me and my husband. But now I'm thinking I might actually really enjoy the process because of the Intarsia. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things where if you have a perspective where you recognize what's going to be your sort of mindless knit and what's going to be your knit where you're sort of putting a little bit more into it, and then you just try to do what you're in the mood for at the time, you can sort of organize it so that you're always having fun. So that's my finished object. I also have a half object for you this week. You may have guessed that I was able to finish my Pygmy Puff sock. I was very close to finishing it last week and hadn't, because I chose to work on other projects. Here it is. So I haven't weaved in the end, which is very unusual for me. That's because I was away from my needles, darning needles. Basically, I just I finished it up, and then I've kind of set it aside. I haven't cast on the next one because I wanted to focus on getting the love sock done, and then in my spare time when I sort of had my like mindless knitting, I was really focused on Brian's Beyond the Wall sock, because technically these are for March and I had a huge head start on them, so I felt like I could kind of set them aside for a minute. This yarn is Plump Merino from A Homespun House in her Pygmy Puff colorway, which is of course a Harry Potter character. This is my little Pygmy Puff progress keeper that I made for the project, and I made him from, I want to say, the second Care of Magical Creatures charm bracelet from Tiny Owl Knits. Fish lips kiss heel, rounded toe, 2x2 twisted rib, twisted only on the knits, not on the purls, for I want to say 20 rounds, which is a little longer than I normally do, so that's a bit of an experiment. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about this guy. Just a fun vanilla sock. You know, I love the yarn, of course, and he will be part of my entry for the year-long Harry Potter themed cowl with Katie of Inside number 23. So that's living in my 9 3/4 pouch from Society 6. And then, as I mentioned, Ryan's Beyond the Wall socks. I mean, all socks at this point are themed after various fantasy novels. That's just a given. So I started these at the Oscars last week, and I got maybe down to like here-ish, and then I've kind of just in some spare time every now and then I've knit on them a little bit this week, but not very much. And they are Knit Picks Felici in the Beyond the Wall colorway. I'm going to be doing a black heel and toe, and I think that for the first time I'm going to split the toe within a stripe, within one of the black stripes. I don't love the way a split heel, did I say toe? I meant heel. I'm going to split a black stripe around the heel. Personally, I don't love the way that a split stripe looks when it's around a contrast color, but if I'm matching the stripe itself, like I am here with the black, I think that's actually going to look really good. So we'll see how that goes and how I like it. And so for him, I've knit him one other pair of socks. They fit atrociously. It was a Christmas situation, so they were a secret, and I was just kind of going by the general knowledge of this is how big men's feet are. Well, my husband has delicate, narrow ankles. His feet are, you know, long-ish. I mean, he wears like a 10.5 American shoe size, but and he has a pretty big instep. But, you know, it's not like he has some huge, massive ankle. He has basically the same ankle I have, honestly. So I wear socks with a 56 stitch count on a 2.25 needle. For him, I went up to a 60 stitch count, so just 4 more stitches, and a 2.5 millimeter needle. And it seems to fit pretty well for now. I don't think it's quite as tight as I like my socks to be, so it's possible that I should, in the future, either go down to 56 stitches on this needle or maybe keep the stitch count and change the needle. I don't know. We'll think about that. It will have to do a bit with how it fits his foot as well. So his ankle is pretty narrow in comparison to his foot. It might be a situation where I need to make the feet on his a larger stitch count than his ankle. Those are all kinks that I'm okay with working out in the future. I just want to get pretty close to the target with this one so that it's well fitting enough that he enjoys wearing it. But I don't expect to hit the bullseye the very first time that I, you know, make him a pair of socks. The first one was a Mulligan. We don't talk about that. So yeah, so that's my thinking there. I was thinking Fish Lips Kiss Heel just because it's so easy and I love it. But then I was thinking about how he has kind of a high instep. And I was wondering if maybe it would be better to do a heel flap. but I don't want to create too large of a heel area, and with the gusset and everything that it's just like spinning round and round on his foot, because he doesn't have a very large heel. He just has like a pretty bulbous instep. So that's actually kind of troubling me at the moment. What's the right thing to do? And I think what I'm probably going to do before I make the decision is just put this cuff around his foot itself, and then try to get a good sense from that if this is fitting the gusset area fairly well, then I will feel like I don't really need a gusset. I can do the fish Phillips kiss. But if it's feeling too stretched out in comparison to the other places, I might do the heel flap and turn. But I'm really more concerned about these being too big for him than too small. So I don't want to give myself any extra space, and then I feel like the heel flaps can be a lot roomier. So anyway, those are all decisions that need to be made. Let me know if you have suggestions or experience with those things. Another work in progress that's actually very exciting, my Hops a Lot slippers, which you may have noticed in the title opening sequence. Put them like they're not on the wrong feet. Hang on. Here they are. I have felted them, and I have felted their cute little bunny ears as well. I remember telling you guys, since these were knit in stockinette, I was wondering if they would continue to have that nice curl once they were felted, and the answer is yes. So they will get a stitch like this as well before they're sewn on, but I just think that gives them the absolute perfect bunny ear shape. I love it. I think it is so brilliant. And then the slippers themselves, they're still a little bit damp because I felted them last night. And you know, they were saturated, so they are still kind of, you know, a little damp. So I don't have a great idea of what that fit is going to be like, just in terms of like how stiff they're going to be. I'm hoping they're going to be fairly stiff, which, as you can see, I mean, they kind of hold up on their own a little bit. They're not super floppy or anything. So yeah, I'm very excited about this. They're actually knit identically. The reason you can tell the difference between left and right is because I formed them on my feet. The sole is done in garter, which makes it a little thicker and also gives it a nice texture that I think is probably going to help them be a little more slip resistant. So I think that's pretty smart. On this one, I actually done effed up, and I continued the garter all the way up onto this part of the toe, which you can still kind of see if you look at them side by side. But I did my best to just felt the heck out of it to try to make it as smooth as possible. So I don't think it's super noticeable. Once these have dried completely, I will be attaching the ears using thread, very cute, and then stitching on a little nose and eyes up front, and then they will be done. So I'm like 99% of the way there. And I'm very excited about them. They were hand felted. The only other thing I've hand felted, well, I haven't machine felted anything, and the only other thing I felted were Tiny Owl Knits heartfelt rings. These are Tiny Owl Knits as well, by the way. She loves felting. And those just felted up so fast because they were really small. So when I did these, I actually did the ears first. And the ears came together in just a matter of minutes. They felted up very fast as well. She said in the instructions that the slippers would take like a good half hour each, and you would feel like it's never gonna felt, and right when you were starting to feel like it's never gonna felt, it will finally felt. That was totally my experience. And looking at the project page for these, I feel like some of the people's slippers are not felted to the point that I like mine to be felted, where they're very smooth and you're not seeing so much the stitch definition. Some people didn't felt those to that point. I don't know if that's a matter of personal preference or if they were just really tired of rubbing them vigorously, or were thinking like this is as good as they're gonna felt and didn't believe that they would continue to felt better if they kept going. But in my experience, you get to the point where they're clearly felting and then you just keep going for a good deal longer than that, and they will felt more and more and more, and it'll get smoother and smoother the more you go. I did have some places where I had little knots from the sewing up the seams, and as those would start to become these weird little hard things that were hanging off, I would just trim them. I don't think I had anything around here that was looking funky. This is where I have some seams. It's not the smoothest, and I have thought I might trim it a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to. I haven't really decided. Oh, and when you sew them up, you sew up the back, and then she had you sew a little bit up here as well so that it'll kind of catch your heel, which I think was really smart. I feel like the shape of these feels very practical in terms of a slipper. I don't think you can necessarily just step into it. I think you'll probably have to pull it up on your heel, but I think they're very well designed in terms of fitting a foot, and I did start to shape them around my feet at the end once they were starting to get really, really felted and smooth. And for me, I didn't feel that it was like a totally arduous process. I thought it was more fun than anything else. I had been putting it off only because I didn't really have a large chunk of time and I wanted to do it all at once. It wasn't because I wasn't looking forward to it. I was, and I did have a good time. It was really fun, actually. And it's just really magic. I mean, it's almost like some kind of alchemy to watch knitting turn into felting. When the slippers are knit up, they seem just a little bit too big for your feet. And then when you get them all saturated, they stretch out to where it's like you could fit your entire body inside of it. And then when they start to felt, they like squeeze up again and get really small and stiff. And I mean, it's just really magical to watch it happen. I think it's super fun. I feel like I want to be doing some more felting in the future. It's definitely something I could see myself getting into, which I had never really had much interest in before, to be honest. I mean, I just felted because I liked these patterns. I liked the way they looked. It was a totally product-centered thought process, but now it's become a process that I enjoy. I think the big takeaway about hand felting is that you don't have to put a lot of muscle into it. Don't feel like you have to be pressing really hard, because you will absolutely exhaust yourself if you're going to sit there for half an hour pressing really hard with all your energy and all your strength. It's not about that. It is about fast and constant and just tenacity more than anything. It's about just continuing. So you can do just a bunch of like tossing them back and forth, and you can do a lot of this. That's what I like to do, is kind of get the slipper sort of folded like this way, and then I would sort of fold it that way, and I would from that point do a lot of this, and then I would kind of fold it the reverse direction to make sure all the sides were getting the same amount of agitation. But it's really just about loosening everything up. It is not about like, you know, forcing it. So I think that's the number one thing that I would say keep in mind for your first hand felting adventure. My final whip is my meandering shawl. I haven't worked that much on it this week, to be honest, because I was really privileging the love socks, as I said. Then yesterday I worked a good deal on felting the hopsalots. So this is the marker where I was when I showed you last week, so really just a few rounds. I mean, obviously it's brioche, so each of those rounds was like 2 rounds. Here it is. And I'm still absolutely loving it. I want to get back to it. I knit on it a little bit last night and a little bit this morning, last night after I finished the slippers. And I mean, I'm just absolutely in love with it still. Can't say enough about it, to be honest. If you want to know more about it, I went really in depth last episode. But the yarn is the variegated is from Homespun House This is Local Yarn Club. It's her first installment called Nesting. That's also where the Progress Keeper comes from. And then the contrast is Knit Picks Capra in Flamingo, which is actually the same color, the same yarn that the slippers are made in. So that's fun. Oh, where did all the ears go? Oh my gosh, I've lost the ears. How does that happen? Okay, that's, oh my gosh, one. Oh, they're in my lap. Oh my God. Okay, I don't even know what else to say about it. Progress-wise, I've just finished, so you start here, right? That's a repeat, that's a repeat, that's a repeat. And then I'm going to have one more of those length repeats, and then I'm going to have like a border section. In terms of yarn, I would guess around like 40% of the way there. So these are it'll probably be on my needles for a little while longer, depending on how much focus I give it. I got almost this whole way, you know, with that 1 week when I was sick and pretty monogamous with this. So it remains to be seen how soon that'll be off the needles, but I'm not in a huge rush to get it off the needles just because I'm enjoying doing it so much. And with that being said, let's talk about on the horizon. So I have another brioche pattern that I would like to do when I'm finished with this, which I have mentioned before. It is the Marley shawl by Andrea Mallory. It's a very, very large triangular brioche shawl. It takes 4 skeins of fingering weight yarn for 100 gram skeins ish. I think you might have some leftovers. And for on the horizon, I feel like this has been a little repetitive lately, and I don't want to do that. I want it to stay interesting, so I've decided that I'm just going to talk about things that are a new thing I haven't mentioned to you before, or things that I'm literally about to start this week. So Marley would be a new thing. I have ordered some yarn for it, which I will mention in Stash Enhancement, although I don't have it to show you yet. So that's definitely a new plan. I've been thinking about the Marley and looking at the Marley, but it hasn't really been official until I found that yarn. Other than that, this week I will probably be starting the Renesmee socks, which are the pattern sock I'm going to do for March. And if I get my yarn delivery, I might start the Floam cardigan. So, moving on to Stash Enhancement. As I said, I ordered some yarn for the Marley, so I started watching the Espace Tricot podcast, and they have a shop in Montreal called Espace Tricot, and they mentioned on their podcast that they carry hedgehog fibers. Well, I love hedgehog fibers. I've never seen it in person, but when I've looked online, various places that sell it, seems to be pretty limited what they have in stock. And so I just looked up Espace Tricot's website because they mentioned that they had e-commerce. No, they didn't mention that they sold hedgehog fibers. They mentioned that they had e-commerce, and then I just went lurking on there, and then I saw hedgehog fibers. That's how it worked. Anyway, I saw it, and I fell very much in love with a more of a variegated speckled yarn that I will show you, and then I saw a tonal that I thought it worked really well with, and so I ordered 2 skeins of both of them for the Marley shawl in particular. So very excited about that. Can't wait to show you those. I've also ordered the Quince & Co. owl for my Floam cardigan, which, as you know, I looked for in person last week, but my local yarn store only carried a couple lines of Quince & Co., but not the owl. So I went ahead and ordered that online, so when that comes, I will be showing that to you as well. For In Stitches, I have a sewing project to show you. So I made this a while ago. This is a faux fur and plaid flannel cowl. I wore this yesterday. We got some snow and it was fairly cold. And pulled this one out. So this is inspired by something that we carried at Anthropology a few years ago, back when I was working there. And that one, I think it came in a couple of colors, but the one I always saw and the one I remember was like brown fur with maybe some black running through it. It had a very natural look to it. And the inside was like kind of a classic like red flannel. I don't think it was the buffalo plaid like this, but something that was a little bit like more casual lumberjacky looking, especially with the brown fur. It just had a more casual vibe. And I thought, because this is such a statement piece, it would be fun to get something that would work a little bit more formal, where I could maybe wear it for more formal occasions, as well as just fun occasions. So, as you'll see, if I just put it like this, it's like very, very bold. Then you can also kind of fold it in on itself a little bit without losing the lining, and you get something that's a little bit more reasonable. I like it both ways. Either way, it's a lot of look, but I like it. It's obviously very comfy and cozy, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's one of those things where I really loved the item in the store, but I had an idea for how I could make it more suited to myself. I thought I had colors in my mind that I thought these are the colors I would like. So I'm really glad that I made it for myself instead of just buying it, because you always really enjoy those things that you have for yourself. I do think I made mine a little bit taller this way than the original, which is why it has this sort of like very dramatic shape to it here. I think it's just a little stiffer this way. That might also have a bit to do with my material. My material might just be stiffer than the kind they had, but I think I made it a bit taller. If I could do it again, I would probably make it slightly less dramatic, but it's a dramatic thing anyway, so it's like whatever. But I love it. So I mentioned that I wanted to tell you about some knit casts that I have been watching, specifically ones with smaller audiences that you might not already know about. So I'm going to run through some of my favorites that I have recently started watching. Recently, and some not super recently, but all of them since I started this podcast, and all of them have smaller audiences. And so I want to make sure that you know about them if you haven't heard. So the first one is 10,000 Stitches. I found out about her when she shouted me out a few weeks ago, maybe more like a month or two ago. And I checked out her podcast and I loved it. She focuses on small scale knitting, so she does a lot of socks, which you know I love to see. She does some hats. She is very prolific with her knitting. Like I feel like she gets through things really quickly. Part of that might just be that she's on like a bi-weekly schedule right now, but I do think she's a fast knitter, and when you're focused on smaller things like socks, you get through them quick. She's definitely an adventurous knitter in terms of like seeing a pattern and making it work for her. Like, remember recently there was a pattern sock that had these sort of chevron shapes going down the front of it, and I don't remember if she was adjusting it to be toe up instead of cuff down or the other way around, but she really talked you through like how she had adjusted that, and she's just a lot of fun as well. Just I like her personality and her perspective on things, so that's a big one. I've watched more episodes of that than some of these others, so I can kind of give you a little bit more information there just because I've been watching her for longer. Some of the more recent ones, Dunkelgrün. All of these, the name will be in the show notes, by the way, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it or to spell it. Dunkelgrün is a podcast that is hosted by a girl in, I want to say she's in Switzerland. She might be in Germany. I apologize. Here's what I really liked about her. I've only seen one episode so far, but I'm like hooked. She experiments with natural dyeing. She did some experiments with avocado pits to try to get like a pale pink, which was interesting. And she has background as a chemist, so she's really approaching things from that like scientific point of view, which I really appreciate. And I just really liked her personality and her style as well. Hi, Come up here. Come get in my lap. Come get your cuddles. Next is Little Bean and Me, who I discovered through her yarn. She is the yarn dyer who did a lot of the Harry Potter colorways that you have seen, including the Amortentia socks that I was so in love with. So I found out about her through her yarn, which I absolutely love, and she of course talks about yarn dyeing and her business and stuff on her podcast, which is fun for me, especially like to come as a fan of her yarn. I always love hearing about that perspective, whether it's someone like Molly from A Homespun House or Kristen of Woolenvine, obviously being like better known podcasts where the person behind it is also a well-known yarn dyer. Like, I just love to get that inside perspective, and I'm a big fan of her yarns. Next is Squirrel Pie Productions, which I actually just watched the first episode, for me, not the first episode ever, yesterday. And I liked her a lot. She's very funny, and she has fun taste in yarn. Like, she likes very colorful yarn and colors that I wouldn't necessarily go for myself because they're pretty bright, but I really enjoy seeing the way that she like puts them together and just like the kinds of things that she goes for. And I really liked her personality too. Then there's Wool Needles Hands, which one of the things that's fun about her podcast is she has some different segments that you won't see other places. Like, one of them is she talks about fiber arts in the news. So, for example, she did a segment where she talked about these newly engineered clothing that people with disabilities could wear as a base layer that would sort of help support their muscles that weren't necessarily doing all of the work that they might be doing, and I'm trying to figure out how you put this. Like, if someone had muscular dystrophy, I guess, or other sort of disabilities of that nature. So that was just really fascinating to kind of look at fiber from like that perspective, just as a little segment. Of course, the majority of her podcast is just her own knitting life, but I think it's cool that she's like thinking outside the box in that way. And then finally, Wool Jewel. Wool Jewel is has a big emphasis on garment knitting. So she considers herself a sweater knitter above all, and she's just like constantly knitting another sweater and like thinks nothing of frogging an entire bodice or, you know, frogging a sleeve 6 times to get it to be the right length for her, I think he's her husband or boyfriend, partner, whoever he is. And like, I really like her attitude about that. I feel like she knits in this sort of like big way where she's like courageous about it, and she's not, she doesn't get down on herself when things don't go right, but she's like willing to recognize like, this is a mistake and I want to make this right. This is important to me to make it right, which is sort of the philosophy that I have on things. And I always enjoy watching a podcast from someone who's a big garment knitter, because I find those to be one of the more interesting things to follow along with and see. And sometimes when you see someone's garment on a podcast, it really makes it come alive for you more than a project page can. And that helps you know, like, hey, this is something I really want to make for myself. So yeah, so those are my suggestions for smaller knit casts. I hope you will check them out, and don't hesitate to let them know I sent you if you do. Hey, you just wanted some love, didn't you? You just wanted some love. So instead of knitting for chit chat, I think I'll just pet on this cat. I have some exciting stuff to talk to you about this week. So one thing is something I can finally, gosh, he's getting so much fur in my face. Something I can finally reveal that I've been wanting to talk about, which is that I'm going to enter an MFA program for creative writing in June of this year. It'll be a 2-year program, and the programs that I've applied to are low residency, so they're structured. There you go, honey. They're structured for people. Excuse me. So the programs are structured for people who have a full-time job and or family and don't want to uproot their whole life to move to another town for a grad program, which I super appreciate, especially since I'm a little bit older than, I'm not just out of my undergraduate. So I applied to some of the top low residency MFA programs. One of them is Bennington College, which I considered going to for my undergrad, and I just always felt a connection to that school and an interest in their sort of just their philosophy on things. Just always been really intrigued by them. And I think the reason I found out low residency programs were even a thing is that I was like stalking Bennington online one day and I saw that. So then I looked up all the top ones. So I applied there. I applied at Vermont College of Fine Arts, which is consistently ranked as the number 1 or the number 2 program. Spalding University, which is in Louisville, but does a lot of study abroad as part of their program. The the Stone Coast MFA program at University of Southern Maine, and Lesley University, which is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's like right in the middle of the Harvard campus, basically. There's like Harvard on one side and Harvard on the other side, and a little Lesley in between. They were a historically women's college, and I think a lot of women's colleges oftentimes would pop up like right next to a men's college, like with, what's the one that's across from Columbia? Is it Wesleyan? I don't feel like it's Wesleyan. I feel like it's one of the other ones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, like I said, I had this like long history with feeling connected to Bennington. And I work with someone who graduated from Vermont College of Fine Arts, so she spoke very highly of them, and of course they're top rated. But the more I did research on the programs that I was applying to, the more Lesley was just standing out to me. So one thing is, you saw the book that I had on the podcast last week, Yarn, Remembering the Way Home, the memoir by Kyoko Mori. She's a professor at Lesley. That's how I found that book. So I was sitting there about to have my interview over the phone, and I started looking up some of the faculty on Goodreads, and the first person I looked up was her, and the first book that came up was about knitting. I mean, it was just so incredible. So there's so many things that I like about their program. They have an independent study as part of the process. So I would be focused on nonfiction. I got my undergrad in poetry, and I studied a lot of fiction as well, and now I'm primarily interested in nonfiction. But I'm definitely, like, I only applied to programs that had some kind of cross-disciplinary offering because I'm very interested in that. And Bennington's downside there is that they only have poetry, fiction, and nonfiction as the genres, which is somewhat limited compared to some of the others. So by contrast, Vermont and Lesley, I think, both have poetry, fiction, nonfiction, writing for young people, writing for stage and screen, and then Lesley's going to be adding a graphic novel focus, and which, like, oh my god, I would love to learn. I would love to study that. So much. Fun Home is like one of my favorite books of all time. So, like, I would absolutely be interested in learning how to create a graphic memoir. Like, I would love that. So Lesley has this huge focus on incorporating other studies into the core. So you have an independent study every single semester, and you can choose to study another genre or study research or translation or just anything that you can make a case as being related to your core work. And I just feel like we really really click in terms of, what I'm looking for and what I value. And it was just feeling like right, they were feeling like they might be my first choice. So when I had my interview, I asked the head of the department who was interviewing me, when can I expect to hear about acceptance? Because the women at Vermont had told me, they don't wait for the so the deadline for most of the schools was March 1st. And at Vermont, they said, we don't wait for the deadline. We don't wait for everyone to send in their applications and then evaluate them all together and then let people know. We evaluate the applications individually and we let you know on a rolling basis. So if your application comes in a month before the deadline, which was around when my application got in, you might know, a few weeks after that, or a few weeks after your, final bit of paperwork comes in or whatever. So I asked them about that at Leslie, and he said, no, we evaluate everything all together. Only in rare circumstances would we let someone know before the deadline. So then last Friday, which was a few days before the deadline, I got an email notifying me of my acceptance at Leslie, and I freaked out. And then on Monday, I got a package in the mail, one of the large envelopes, the big one, as they say on Gilmore Girls. Did you get the little envelope or the big envelope? I got the big one from Vermont, and then the next day I got accepted to Spalding. And it's only a few days into, the period where you should be expecting to hear it all. I wasn't expecting to hear from anyone for a few weeks. So I haven't heard from Maine or Bennington yet. But I've been making my pro-con lists, and I decided to eliminate Spalding from the running. And even though I haven't heard from Bennington, I decided, I have a deadline for letting Vermont and Leslie know. They might not hear from Bennington until right up on that deadline or even after that deadline. So I need to make my decision. If Bennington isn't my first choice, I need to go ahead and let Leslie or Vermont know that they're my first choice. So even though I hadn't heard from Bennington yet, I put them on my, I've made a pro-con list for all three of those schools, Vermont, Bennington, and Leslie, if that makes any sense. And I keep coming back to Gilmore Girls because, it's very resonant in my life. But in Gilmore Girls, if you remember, spoiler alert, everybody, Rory always dreams of going to Harvard, and then she gets accepted to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, and she makes these pro-con lists, and she realizes that she would be a better fit for Yale. And that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm reading all of these faculty publications. I went to the library and I got 3 huge stacks, this tall, of books by faculty members from all 3 of these programs. And right now, the pro-con lists, the pro side for Leslie is twice as long as the pros for the other 2 schools. And the other 2 schools each have something in the con section, and Leslie doesn't have anything. So it's I think I've made my decision, but it's still sinking in and I haven't committed to it. I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude because, and I don't know how to put this properly, because when I told people I wasn't sure, I didn't tell people I was applying. I hardly told anyone, and I didn't necessarily expect to get into any program. That's the thing. My professor from my undergrad, who wrote me a letter of recommendation and gave me advice, she said, you should apply to 10 schools if you can afford it. 10 schools. Now, I only applied to 5 because there were only 5 that I wanted to go to. There were only 5 that met my expectations and had the offerings that I wanted. And I just, you don't expect to necessarily get into any, much less to get into a school that's the very top rated of any of these schools, Vermont, and and a school that you think is probably your first choice, which is Leslie. Like, and it's an honor to get into Spalding too. And if I get into the other two, it'll be completely overwhelming. But like, what I'm trying to say is, I think when people hear that, they think that I'm being like either falsely modest or that I'm not confident in my work. And the thing is, I'm really, really confident in myself as a writer. I do think that I deserve a place in a top program. It's just that I recognize that your level of success in the world is not always aligned to what you deserve or how good your work is. You know, there are people like who do good work that is never appreciated. And when I was trying to make it as an actress, and I was never even like really trying to make it as an actress, like I never even really got to that point. I was just an acting student by the time I stopped. But I had the experience constantly of rejection and constantly of knowing that like whether or not you got a callback, whether or not you got a part, often did not have anything to do with your ability. It often had a lot to do with other factors. It had a lot to do with luck. It had a lot to do with whether you looked the way that they wanted that character to look, whether you had certain qualities innately that they were wanting for that part, you know? And I felt the same way about this. So like I'm feeling really, really, really incredibly grateful. Oh, I didn't even mention, yesterday I finally got my paper acceptance from Leslie because I had gotten the email acceptance. And with the paper acceptance, I found out that I got the top scholarship. And like, to feel that the school that you think is your first choice school, that you would be their like first choice student, which is sort of what it feels like to be offered the best scholarship. I don't want to get like dramatic, but it kind of feels a little bit like when you fall in love and you have that feeling of like, this person's the greatest person in the world and they think I'm the greatest person in the world. Like, how lucky am I that I love this person and they love me too? Like it feels like such a miracle that you could love someone who loves you. Like everything that has to conspire in the world for that to happen, you know? And I'm kind of feeling that way right now about this happening in my life and like this opportunity. My friend who I work with who went to Vermont keeps telling me like, you're about to have the greatest experience of your life. Like these were such great years and it's the best thing I ever did. And like, I'm so happy for you. I'm so excited for you. And I know that she's right. Like I know that I loved school and I loved college and I love being a student. I love learning. I love writing. I love reading. I love discussing all of that with other people who are passionate about it. And like, I'm so excited that I'm about to start doing that again. It has been 7 years since I graduated from college. And I've been, you know, reading and learning and writing and doing all of the stuff that you do, but it's not, you don't have that same focus that you have as a student. And I'm just so excited to actually be able to devote all of my time and energy. I mean, I'll be working full time and everything as well, obviously, because that's how things are in the modern world. But like, I'm just, I feel like I'm a little incoherent right now because I'm really excited about it. So now I think I'm running up against the time that I want this episode to be. So I'm gonna skip the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'll talk to you more about it next week, which is that I have started a 6-week vegan challenge, basically for Lent, although I'm not Catholic. I just found that it would be sort of a less arbitrary time period, and then there might be other people who were giving up other things as well and kind of sit in that community for a while, especially since I live in a very Catholic city and my in-laws are Catholic. And my father is a recovering Catholic, so he participates in Lent a lot of times as well. Yeah, so I will talk more about that next week, because there's certainly a lot to talk about there, and you know, my experience. So go ahead and let me know any questions that you have about that if you would like them answered during Chit Chat next week, and I will try to answer them. Yeah, so thank you for tuning in. Like I said, subscribe if you haven't yet. Join the Ravelry group if you're interested. Let's get this knit along going. Super excited to try new sock techniques. And if you're a returning viewer, just thank you so much, you guys, for supporting my channel and participating in the conversation and letting me know that you're out there, because it has been really, really great getting to know you all and finding an audience for my knitting excitement. All right, I will see you guys next week. I hope that you have a very, very good week in the meantime. Bye.